Words matter. Ideas drive change. And wisdom can transform the human action. These are the words, ideas and wisdom that transformed profession of chartered accountancy over the years. Our forefathers and their vision of modern India, driven by strong economic foundation, led to the setting up of Free India's premier accountancy institute, the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India or ICAI in the year 1949. From the past 70 years, ICAI and its members have followed the essence of its motto, Ya Esha Supteshu Jagarti, the person who is awake in those that sleep. As our nation's democracy was being shaped, the responsibility of shaping the future of accountancy profession, the strongest pillar of a robust economy, was entrusted to the forefathers of accountancy profession. They not only set the highest standards, but also paved the way for the generations to follow. And what followed thereafter, as they say, is history. This 70 years journey has indeed made ICAI a treasure trove that will enrich the path of future generations to build a resilient new India.
Once again requesting all the delegates present here to assemble here in Orchid as we're about to begin our technical session on cyber security in financial services in next 1 minute. Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. A very hearty welcome to all the members, delegates, and dignitaries present here with us. On behalf of the entire ICAI fraternity, I welcome you all to the 21st World Congress of Accountants, which is indeed an historic moment as for the first time in 118 years, India, ICAI, is delighted to host the 21st World Congress of Accountants here in Mumbai, India. Celebrating ideas for future, the World Congress this time has dwelled upon the theme Building Trust Enabling Sustainability, keeping in mind the important role accountancy profession is playing as the protector of public interest. And today, right here, as we've all gathered for the technical session on cybersecurity in financial services, I would now be requesting our esteemed panelists on stage. So a great round of applause, please, for CA Naveen N D Gupta, past president of ICAI. I also now invite on stage Mr. Vishal Salvi, who's the Chief Information Security Officer and Head of Cybersecurity Practice, Infosys. A great round of applause, please. Next, I'd like to invite CA Dharshan Shanthamurthy, who's the founder and CEO of SISA Information Security. A great round of applause, please. Moving on, I would now be inviting on stage Mr. Tushar Haralkar, who's the Senior Technical Specialist Security, IBM India, South Asia. Now, without wasting any further moments, I would now be requesting CA Naveen N D Gupta ji to please be the moderator and take over this session. A great round of applause, please.
Good afternoon, friends. I welcome you all to this wonderful World Congress of Accountants, this particular site session, where we would be developing upon a very important topic, cybersecurity in financial services. And since the theme of this World Congress is building trust and ensuring sustainability, so cybersecurity in itself is something which is very important because we professional accountants have to play a very important role as far as cybersecurity is concerned to make this world and businesses secure and better place to be. So friends, this is my second opportunity to chair a session at World Congress of Accountant. First being in the year 2018 as then President of Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, when I was there at Sydney, Australia, to receive the baton on behalf of Institute of Chartered Accountants of India from Australia to hold this World Congress of Accountants at Mumbai. And I have very memorable memories from there. And I won't be just in my duties if I don't take this moment to express gratitude to then President IFAC, Madam Rochelle Grimes, who was kind enough, and Vice President Mr. Inkeju for accepting my request then and expressing confidence in India and allotting this mega opportunity to host World Congress of Accountants at Mumbai. And today, I can say whatever assurances we have given to IFAC then, that it would be a mega event. I can say with humility at my command that all the commitments have been fulfilled and it's a very successful event, and I express thanks and gratitude to wonderful team ICAI for ensuring this mega successful event. Friends, cyber security to be based on my experience as professional accountant, auditor, member of audit committees and boards of public interest entities. In one phrase, in these times of technological innovation and disruption, if I have to summarize, means better to be safe than sorry. Since like IoT, without cyber security becomes Internet of Threat, rightly, it's Internet because everything is becoming virtual. So it really would be threatening if we don't have sufficient cybersecurity mechanisms, and it would be threat to reputation built over years to businesses. It's like insurance premium for ensuring sustainable coexistence for any human endeavor and all types of enterprises. Today, we all would agree that the financial services sector, because the topic is cybersecurity in financial services, so I thought, because my job is to set the ball rolling and lay down the preamble, so just introducing the topic. Today, we all would agree that the financial services sector is the primary driver of nation's economy, comprising broad range of more specific activities like banking, capital markets, pensions, insurance, and the strength and robustness of these financial services sector determines the prosperity of any nation's population. It, friends, it touches and influences life and livelihood of each and every member of any economy. And what remains invested, the reason for this, sector being so important is that because what remains invested or deposited in the banks and capital markets or insurance companies, at least from India experience I can say, is nothing else but not merely people's money as savings, but hope and trust the citizens have and what they save for a rainy day, and that rainy day may be a day when they may not exist. So financial sectors is very important for the robustness it has. Therefore, today's topic, cybersecurity in financial services, gains added importance as these public interest entities in financial services sectors need to respond proactively with effective solutions to the ever-evolving cyber threats to safeguard public trust. And we are very fortunate that we have, I can say, that we have the best people from the industry to guide us through today. And to introduce this topic as a layman and in layman's term, I would say we all have been confronted with at least one such very common cyber crime or cyber threat as a layman. And I can say on a daily basis, we hear around us and we see on social media, if we have some account on Facebook or anything, that somebody in our fraternity gets affected by cyber threat of this common type. And this cyber threat is more legitimate looking yet problematic, and generally it is called business email compromise attacks, BEC as it is popularly called. In BEC, the scamster uses a variety of social engineering and phishing techniques to break into target's business email or social media account and impersonates the target, creates rapport with victims, and tricks them into transferring large amount of money into accounts of criminals. This may appear very simple because we hear and see around us on a day-to-day basis, but frankly speaking, it's a very big threat. And as per FBI USA data, during last 7 years since 2016, over US dollars 43 billion has been lost through this.
Dear exhibitors, delegates, and visitors, request you all to pay attention to this important announcement. As you know, today is the last day of World Congress of Accountants. Please note the exhibition closes at 5:30 p.m. and you will all be requested to proceed towards the exit of the halls. We request you to carry along and take care of all your personal belongings as the service gates will be opened for all the neighbors for the dismantling process. We hope you.
Thank you. Sorry for the interruption. So it's from whichever jurisdiction we are, we all would agree $43 billion is not a small amount by any standards. Friends, wake-up call for the financial world as far as cyber threats, to the best of my memory, was first when systematic cyber risk in the financial systems was understood to be severely underestimated, was in February 2016, when hackers even targeted the Central Bank of Bangladesh and exploited the vulnerabilities in SWIFT and tried to steal $1 billion at that point of time. But while most of the transactions were blocked, but still $101 million still disappeared. So it's a mega threat as far as cybersecurity, and the scale of activities is never small. And importance of cybersecurity to financial services sector was thereafter highlighted at topmost global platform when in 2017, the G20 warned that cyber attacks could undermine security and confidence and endanger financial stability of world economy. We all are aware that now India would be the chair of G20. So this statement becomes very important, and this threat was highlighted at the highest level, we can say. So, and as per the Indian Cybersecurity Watchdog 13, India's banking, financial services and insurance industry, BFSI industry, is the most targeted sector for the hackers and cyber criminals. India has been at the forefront of attacks targeted at the Asian region, with 7.4% of targeted attacks in the year 2022 being towards the Indian subcontinent, whether it was nationalized banks, cryptocurrency exchanges or wallets, NBFCs or credit card leaks. India emerged as the Asia's newfound hotspot for cyber attacks. The prime reason is unprecedented growth of blockchain and cryptocurrency, coupled with newer and evolving phishing mechanisms, which has given threat actors unprecedented access to the sector with new and improved tactics, techniques, and procedures. Friends, most worrisome cyber attacks, apart from these solitary incidents, have been where where it corrupts the integrity of financial data and algorithms and steal the personal data and confidential records of the transactions. Severity of the situation could be gauged from a report as far as the threat of cyber crimes is concerned, is that if cyber crime costs, if a particular incident happens, the cost it has on the economy, on the political system, or the financial stability of the country, if it would be measured as a country, then cyber crimes, which estimated to have inflicted damages totaling more than $6 trillion globally in the year 2021. It's not a small amount again. And that would be the world's third largest economy after US and China. So it's mega. Cybercrime costs here includes damages and destruction to data, stolen money, lost productivity, theft of intellectual property, theft of personal and financial data, embezzlement, fraud, post-attack disruptions to the normal course of business, forensic investigation, restoration and deletion of hacked data and system, and reputational harm. So these are the type of losses a good business which has established over a period of last 50 years, a single cyber attack or cyber crime or a single event could make the good efforts of last 50 years go to drain. So it's very important. And to the best of my understanding, ongoing trends that define the risk of cyber attacks to financial services sector are basically why cyber crimes are more and more happening in financial services sector. If we try to enlist the reasons, these could be the reasons. The global financial system is going through an unprecedented digital transformation, which is being accelerated by COVID-19 pandemic. Banks and financial services companies compete with technology companies for innovative tech-enabled products, and technology companies compete with banks on the other hand. Meanwhile, pandemic has heightened the demand for online financial services and made work from home arrangement the norm. We are aware that today all the software companies and IT companies are grappling to bring back their manpower to the offices, so as to, primarily because of the threat of cyber crimes that is glooming big. Many malicious actors are taking advantage of this digital transformation and pose a growing threat to the global financial system, financial stability and confidence in the integrity of the system. And furthermore, inspired by ease of implementation of business as a service model, cyber criminals have developed their variant known as malware as a service. Malware-based cyber incidents accounted for about 18% of total attacks recorded against financial services sector in 2022. Trojans, ransomwares, botnet, and info stealers have been most popular attack vectors used by these cyber criminals. And our very virtuous faculty would further take us through the latest attack vectors, I should say. As per Forbes.com in the year 2021, the average number of cyber attacks and data breaches increased by 15.1% from the previous year. Events around us provide sufficient empirical data and evidence that cyber attacks are growing in number, frequency, and sophistication, though organizations are increasingly responding by increasing their security budgets and adopting more advanced defenses, keeping up with the threats. Looking at enormous threats apart from enterprise-level efforts, coordinated macro-level multilateral policy action is needed for strengthening cyber resilience, and some of which, to the best of my knowledge, could be bucketed as government and industry. Apart from micro-level, industry-level, company-level efforts, a macro-level approach is needed where government and industry should strengthen security by sharing information on threats and by creating financial computer emergency response teams modeled on Israel's FinCert, actions and policy statements by, and we already have certain policy actions taken at highest level by certain most developed nations, and the worth noting are where the governments of Australia, the Netherlands, United Kingdoms have already taken a first step with statements indicating that cyber attacks from abroad may be regarded as illegal use of force or intervention in the domestic affairs of another country. So basically, cyber threat has been taken to a level where it is treated as a cyber war against one country by another country, and that sort of attention is really required. And I was just looking at, just 2 days back, the Vice President of USA, Mrs. Kamala Harris, has called one of the Indian entrepreneurs to discuss about cyber security to the White House. Financial authorities and regulators should also prioritize increasing the financial sector's resilience against attacks targeting data and algorithms. This should include secure encrypted data vaulting that allows members to securely back up customer account data overnight. Regular exercises to simulate cyber attacks should be employed to identify weaknesses and develop action plans. Friends, the time has come for international community, including government, central banks, global bodies like IFAC, and influential stakeholders like we professional accountants, as CFOs, members of audit committees, boards, and auditors, to come together to address this urgent and important challenge. It's time for well thought out strategy which provides a blueprint for turning words into action. Friends, as you are aware, my job was only to lay down and set the ball rolling for all of you. So I basically confined myself to the macro level talk because since you all are there, so it would be like showing Diya to the Suraj. So I'm not trying to venture or encroach upon your space. So let's move to our faculty, and thank you very much. I hope I have done my job at macro level.
Check.
So we all are here now at the global stage, and it's a global problem that we all would be discussing. So we can do one thing. Either you can, on your own behalf, take some time and introduce, give your perspective on this subject, whatever you understand, based on your experience, and then we can take up certain questions based on whatever you deliberate, or straight away I have received certain questions from the gathering, and we can proceed based on that. We can go and give a quick so that would be better. So you may start, sir. You may talk from here, or Tushar ji may go there. ठीक है. Quickly, that would be good. So Tushar ji would be sharing his experience quickly on this important topic.
Okay, thank you. Am I audible?
Yes.
So first of all, good afternoon and thanks. It's a great honor to be part of this esteemed panelist. So I think the context has already been set by Mr. Naveen. So let me give a brief about what are the top cyber threats that we are seeing in the financial institutions. So as per IBM X-Force research and the recent cost of data breach report, we are seeing 41% of the attacks are due to social engineering attacks, which are like phishing. So when we talk about phishing attack, it's basically, there are two objectives. One is the hacker wants to trick you to click a fake link and then get a lot of sensitive information like your username, password, your personal information, right? And the second could be he wants to install something malicious on your device. It could be a malware, right? And then finally steal the data. Now, this is just one form of social engineering attack, right? The second is, of course, phishing. The SMS that we receive, right? The bit.ly links, it could be malicious, right? Phishing, which could be a fraudulent call from a bank, pretending to be from a bank, and convincing the customer to share his OTP or personal details, right? So social engineering attacks are on the rise. While social engineering attacks are on the rise, what we see, the second category of attack is the ransomware attack, right? We are seeing a lot of ransomware attack, especially in the last 2 years, and it is growing, especially attacking financial industry and recently also manufacturing. So what happens in ransomware attack is the hacker actually encrypts your data and then will ask for ransom, which is money, to get back your data. Or maybe if he's not giving back your data, he may just say that if you don't give me ransom or money, I'll just post it publicly on internet, right? The third category of threat that we see is around insider threats, right? So we see, especially in the last 2 years, due to pandemic, most of us were working remotely, right? And that has increased the risk of your internal applications, your devices, your infrastructure exposed to outside world, right? So there are no more users who are accessing the applications inside the office. They're coming from home. They are no more coming from their own, they are no more coming from corporate owned devices. They're coming from personally owned devices. So eventually we are living in a perimeterless world, right? There is no perimeter now as such. Plus the username, password or OTP, is that enough? Maybe not, because we are seeing username, password, OTPs are also getting compromised. So in this digital world, how do I know that this is a legitimate person, or is it really a fraudster, or is it a bot, or is it somebody else? Because the username, password will be correct, the OTP also will be correct, but I do not know who is behind the keyboard, right? It's difficult to really understand that. So that's the third aspect, right? In terms of insider threats, how do I identify, is it a legitimate user? Is it coming from the right device? And all of that. So while we say humans are the weakest link, devices are also becoming the weakest link now, because that's one of the source through which the attacks are happening, right? So no matter how much of security is put into the application, when it goes into the device, it becomes unmanaged, right? And that is where we see organizations like financial institutions looking for visibility in terms of what is happening on the device. The devices from which the customers are coming, is it clean? You know, all of those aspects are becoming really very important. And the fourth category that I would like to put it is financial institutions and other organizations have started to invest in security. They have started to look at security by design rather than afterthought, right? While they have done that, they have invested in some of the controls like firewall, IDS, IPS. A lot of security investments have been made to protect the crown jewel. But the challenge is there are different tools from different vendors, right? And then they don't talk to each other. So the challenge that organizations, especially like financial institutions, are facing is they do not have the complete visibility. If there is an attack which has happened, how do I make sure that the attacker does not move from one network to other network, right? So, so attack is definitely going to happen, but the challenge is how do I really predict, prevent, detect, and respond. So that is what the challenge is going to be. And I will let Vishal talk about the other thing, but just wanted to set the context in terms of what are the threats that we are seeing, and probably later I can talk about how we can mitigate these cyber threats. Thank you.
Tusharji, straight away, you have set the tone and shared your experience. You are a technocrat, but in your company, you must be moving around with professional accountants and chartered accountants, and they must be there around you in various capacities. So, looking at your experience as a technocrat, how do you feel a chartered accountant or a professional accountant can really contribute in this war against cybersecurity threats? Particularly in today's time when we are just moving out of COVID, which is the, well, if we see based on my this thing, COVID, and then work from home culture, and then technical innovations like blockchain and all these things, this has really escalated the situation. So in this entire scenario, in today's time, based on your experience, how you feel a professional accountant can really contribute?
Thanks. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think while there are technologies to solve the problem, but I feel what is required is awareness. So there are a lot of cyber awareness programs which are required, in which, how do you defend against these different attacks, right? Maybe tools are not enough, right? We need awareness. So one of the aspects that I would strongly recommend is that you should go for a lot of cyber awareness trainings. There are a lot of cyber awareness programs which are there.
No, I think you have not understood my question. I'm trying to say how a professional accountant can contribute in this. Apart from whatever is required from him, he definitely would be requiring a training.
Right.
But is an entire game as far as cyber threat to financial services sector is concerned. What is your opinion whether CAs or professional accountants can play an important role in this? And then how can they be an effective team member in this entire threat thing?
Right. Vishal, you want to take that?
First, you would like to.
No, that was the idea I wanted to cover
Chal.
anyway.
So Vishalji would be feels that he could answer my query better.
So thank you, Naveenji, and good afternoon to everyone. And thank you so much for joining this session, especially after lunch. I think Naveenji has, set up the context quite well in terms of how cybersecurity has become a mainstream topic. And it's very coincident that, I actually wanted to talk about how cybersecurity is relevant to accountants, because all of you are here. Some of you are auditors, some of you are, doing the regular audits and reviews of the financial statements of companies. And I think it's important to understand how is cybersecurity going to be relevant for you and how you can play your part in helping us to deliver our goals as cybersecurity professionals. And also, more importantly, because the topic of the Congress, World Congress Accountants today is about trust and sustainability. And trust is a very important aspect of the digital transformation. Because if you look at what is happening across the globe, whether you look at enterprises, whether you look at governments, digital is playing a very strong enabling role in basically everything that we do. When you talk about financial inclusion, we talk about how the payment systems are evolving and creating an exponential growth for financial transaction. How we have used digital to enable vaccination program and so on and so forth. And there are so many different use cases which are coming in terms of how Aadhaar can be used for identification and eKYC, right? Now, all of that enablement has definitely happened, but it needs to be trustworthy. It needs to have a foundation of trust that citizens and individuals and staff can trust that system to ensure that we are able to achieve the three important pillars of cybersecurity, which is confidentiality of the information, integrity of the data, and availability of that information, right? So I think if you take a step back and say in terms of what does it really mean, now just show of hands in this room, how many of you have seen a cybersecurity incident like a malware or a ransomware happening in your organization or one of your clients? Just show of your hands, right? And I'm not surprised because it's more than 50% of you who have raised this hand. And I have got so many different calls coming from my chartered accountant friends who have said that they have faced a ransomware issue in their organizations and they have lost their data, right? Now, the reason cybersecurity has become mainstream is not only because it is an important government issue, it is a nation issue or an enterprise issue, it also impacts you personally, whether it is in terms of your organization getting impacted or you losing your money and your financial information or your financial data, right? So I think the business case for cybersecurity as an important topic is already made. I don't think we need to, really talk about, is it really important, is it not important? And especially on the last day of the Congress, we have had 50% of the audience coming in, is a great example that cybersecurity is an important topic. Do you agree with me? Right. So now the question is, how do we play how do the accountants play their role, and what's important? So first thing is that you need to really understand what this topic is all about, and in the context of the work that you do. So for example, when you are auditors, right, and when we see financial auditors, cybersecurity as a component becomes a very important aspect of their testing methodologies, right? And so you do your risk assessment, you look at, what are the various elements. Now, of course, those organizations which have to comply to a compliance like a Sarbanes-Oxley Act, they understand it very well because, that methodology has been there for so many years now. And so they understand it and they know how it needs to be done. But why do we need to only worry about it when it is Sarbanes-Oxley Act? It has to be done for every financial accounting. When you are looking at your balance sheet, today you can't have a balance sheet which is done by any manual entry. It is all done by the systems. So you need to do input validation and you need to do output validation. And you need to look at all the processes that happen in between. Now, in a large organization, it could have anything between 100 to 3,000 different applications which contribute towards eventually building that balance sheet. And so you need to really understand how information is flowing from one application to another. And there are very clearly defined methods which are available now, which you can apply to make sure that you get assurance that the validation of that balance sheet is absolute, right? So this is one great example for you. The another example is about in terms of what do we need to do when it comes to following best practices, right? And again, the question that we need to ask is in terms of what are the controls and how are the organizations implementing those controls. It could be in the context of B2B or it could be in the context of B2C. Because, when you look at financial sector specifically, we are looking at an extremely exponential rise of cybercrime across the globe, and India has received its fair share of cybercrime as well. Although I must admit that the Indian banking industry and the financial industry has done a stellar job in terms of building proper controls so that we are not allowing it to become a menace. And the RBI and various other regulators have ensured that the banks have been always ahead of the curve in terms of building controls. And so therefore, from that point of view, Indian banking system is fairly well regulated and fairly well implemented as far as cybersecurity controls are concerned. But coming back to my point, I think looking at the various aspects of controls like, second factor authentication, looking at in terms of whether there is a proper security controls which are being placed. There are some 150 technical controls that are there that one can implement in any enterprise. And some of them are more critical, some of them are not, but security is as good as your weakest link. And so you need to make sure that you are protecting and focusing on all of these aspects so that you're able to definitely prioritize those controls, implementation of the controls, but at the same time derive the assurance that they are actually operating and delivering the efficiently, as well as efficacy is also high. So I would encourage all of you to focus on this topic in terms of understanding, like what Tushar was talking about, that there are definitely courses available. For example, SISA is a certified, security auditors course. I think time has come when accountants need to take that, because, it's no longer manual, it's all cyber, and you need to understand the topic for you to be able to govern and understand how the accounting is happening. So I think these are some of the examples, but I think what I would like to say and conclude is that, the digital transformation is real. The way in which attack surface is growing and the threat actors are exploiting that digital transformation is also real. And what is required is all the stakeholders in the ecosystem, and accountants being very important element of them, have to play their part so that we are able to together work towards making sure that the world and this digital transformation is safer and trustworthy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vishalji. Since I believe the talk has been very technical, so just to make it appear simpler, can I ask you, can you share with the audience some of your cyber security investigation that you might have handled without disclosing the name of the client, so as to...
Yeah, thank you. I can probably take that
please.
because I come from that space. And first of
because
all,
that would convert this into more language and terminology which could be better understood by the audience. So
sure. First of all, good afternoon to everyone, and thank you for having me. It's a homecoming for me. I'm a chartered accountant, just like many of you. And just to add to what Vishal said, I was also one of the first DSAs. So Institute already has a program called the DSA, and I think many of our friends out here have it. So this is fantastic. So I just want to answer and top up what Vishal and Tushar just spoke about.
So whatever Tushar Bhai and Vishal have already talked, kindly convert it into a language which we all could understand better. I'm not saying that we are not competent to understand whatever it is, but to make it more desirable.
Yeah, Mr. Tiwari, I think you covered it brilliantly in your opening. I'll just build on your topic as well. So first of all, as accountants, I think we play three large roles. One is as auditing fraternity, and trust is something which is ingrained in each of us as professionals. So when you're actually attesting true and fair statements, cybersecurity is an important component. We've seen the problems that has happened. I mean, all of us have read it in the newspapers, the FTX compromise, which probably lost about $477 million. And it's questioned their going concern, which I'm sure all the accountants here can stand for it. So as auditors, cybersecurity is real and can impact the financial statements, and it's a great forum under the auspice of IFAC. I think this is something that can be very much baked in as to how, as auditors, when we are actually attesting, can we keep in mind the cybersecurity component, right? So that's number one. Number two, I think is this community, we've got a lot of CFOs who have come in and who make very important decisions. So part of the leadership team. And my friends from the cybersecurity community will agree that cybersecurity is not a cybersecurity team's work in any organization. It has to get baked into everything from the leadership team all the way down to the final user. Like the way Tushar was mentioning, one of the reports, I'm not sure whether it's part of the Exforce report, but 70% of all ingress is actually through unknown through basically, users related, which is what we spoke about, spear phishing and so on and so forth. So as CFOs is to be considerate of the fact that you should actually bake in cybersecurity all throughout your organization. And third, I think as one of the things that as accountants we play is having an influence on the board. I'm sure many of us in this community are also on the boards of many organizations. And cybersecurity is a board item now, right? And we've had compromises recently. I'm sure all of us have read in the newspaper of a stock depository, the compromise that has happened. And there's a lot of inconvenience that is being felt by the users. And as board, the board becomes accountable to the shareholders for the value that, at the end of the day, for any cybersecurity incident that happens inside the organization. So as accountants, one of the key things is we need to keep that in mind. So just to top up to what Vishal and Tushar just mentioned, and of course, Mr. Tiwari. But coming to the point on the learnings from the forensic investigations, because it's been about 21 years since I moved from an accounting to cybersecurity, and now we do a lot of forensic investigation. So what's the things that we are observing? So one, cybersecurity incidents are not just restricted to few and, far and few or smaller organizations. You've got all sorts of organizations today which are falling prey to a cybersecurity incident. Like, the great saying that goes in cybersecurity is one of the FBI director, his name is Robert Mueller, once had said that there are only two types of organizations that exist or are going to exist. One, who have been hacked, and the second, who will be. So there is this, and why is that? Why is this really what's causing this? Is because of three things. I mean, Tushar and Vishal also covered that, but just to put it in perspective, there are three things which is leading to this kind of a problem. First is disruption. There's huge amount of disruption both from a business, especially in the financial services sector today, and all of us are witnessing it. You're having these neobanks, digital banks, which is completely branchless at the end of the day, and even some of those banks are actually operating remotely with their entire workforce working from home. So there is huge amount of business disruption, business model disruption that is happening, coupled with technology disruption. I'm sure all of your customers or clients, if you're from the auditing fraternity, have seen a migration towards cloud. And lots of cloud compromises are also happening because it's new technology. All of a sudden, there has been a transformation that is happening in many of these organizations, largely in the financial services vertical. The second is the motivation. In the financial services world, once again quoting the famous robber in the US, I'm not sure how many of you have heard of him, it's called Willie Sutton, had once said, when he was asked, why do you rob banks? He said, someone from the media had asked him, why do you rob banks? And funnily he said, it's a stupid question because that's where the money is. So from the financial services world, that's where the money is, and that's where the fraudsters, and when we do investigations, we've got various types of criminals who actually target these banks and these financial institutions. The first sector is basically the organized crime. You've got groups like the Lazarus Group, or for that matter, there's various, you've got the Mage Cart syndicate, so on and so forth. This is organized crime who get paid to compromise a financial system, or, for that matter, the North Korean, Mr. Tiwari spoke about the Central Bank of Bangladesh. It has been attributed to this North Korean group called the Lazarus Group, which is compromising, and their simple modus operandi in the financial services world is to compromise a user, and from there go into a central server where all the data is kept, make modifications in their bank balances of accounts, and outside the jurisdiction, take out and do an ATM cash out through a mule so that the kingpin doesn't get caught. So those are the kinds of, so that's why just to build on it, we have seen these kinds of compromises that are happening in the financial world. And third, of course, the preparation that we are seeing in the financial because of the attack surface being changed dramatically, the preparation of the organizations, and earlier the notion was the larger the organization, the more the resources, and rightly so. But having said that, the attack surface has phenomenally changed, and which means that the larger the organization, the larger the attack surface, with borderless data centers now extending to even homes. So the trends that we are seeing is definitely, it doesn't matter whether you're large, small, medium, doesn't matter. Every organization is a target, and potentially all of us have to get prepared as to how to actually face in case these kinds of incidents happen in our environments. And as auditors, one of the key things that we can all contribute is to be, one, sensitive to this fact, and also advise our customers, our clients, on how they can actually be more resilient, including starting from the board all the way up to the executive leadership. Mr. Tiwari.
Very well said, Dharshan ji. You are talking about organized crime, cyber crimes as a... Yes, sir. If you don't mind, we can take you in the end. After they complete it, I will definitely come back to you, sir. You can take the seat in the front so that we don't miss you. You are talking about cyber security or cyber crimes as an organized crime. What really I am reading and trying to understand is that cyber crimes are becoming an organized profession. When malware as a service is developing, so that means it is taking a shape as an independent profession altogether. What's your opinion on this? How do you see it developing, and how legal jurisprudence and on a political front, nations and governments, central banks should take it up? Because your industry must be really deliberating on these issues, these emerging trends and issues. So what is the emerging wisdom on this aspect? If you could really share your experience on it with the audience.
So if I understand the question correctly, I think you're saying, the activities which are done by these different gangs or different groups, right? And then there are various segments in that, right? So those who actually develop the bad code or malware.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
The one who distributes it.
Yes.
So that cannot be by any stretch of imagination called as a profession, because it's all nefarious and antisocial activities, right? So all of these guys are criminals.
If not criminal.
It's all criminal activities, and a lot of them are actually getting apprehended and actually are right now being booked and put into jail.
Any popular cases that...
There are many examples. I cannot recall names of those individuals, but there have been cases where Interpol and...
internationally, any particular case, any of you might be...
Yeah, why don't you share?
Yeah. I can share one real case for one of the banks.
You bring it.
Am I audible?
Yeah.
So for one of the banks, the way the attack was done was the internet banking username password was stolen. All right. Now, as a banking, we have this norm of whenever you do a transaction, you have to have an OTP, right? So obviously they could not do any transaction because the OTP was not there. And the way they smartly did this attack was, typically we guide the users to check the URL, everything is fine, then log in, right? In this case, everything was fine. The URL was fine, everything was good. What the fraudsters smartly did was, they had an overlay attack. Basically on the internet banking page, they had laid a QR code, right? And said, scan this QR code, bank is basically having some offer, scan this QR code using your mobile and you get some dollars in your account, right? The URL was fine and the customers thought it is actually an offer from the bank. What they did was from the mobile, they scanned the QR code, and what they actually downloaded and installed was a SMS listener. Okay, now what happened? The hacker already had stolen the username password of internet banking, and since this app was installed on the mobile device, they could actually get an OTP as well, because what they actually installed was an SMS listener, right? So this is one real case of the bank where the hacker was able to, steal a lot of money from the bank. And this is a classic example of how that attack was performed, right? Especially on the mobiles, if you see, right? We keep on installing these apps, giving all the permissions. Now that is one of the things that we need to always look at, because it will ask permission to your SMS, it will ask permission to your photos and all of that, right? You need to be careful in terms of what permissions we are giving, right? So this was a classic case of how this attack was performed and the money was stolen.
I can add to that. So one thing that, of course, so I have a different, I can probably relate to a syndicate called Cobalt Syndicate. I don't know, many of you may have heard of it. This syndicate was very popular in Europe. This gang, a cybercriminal gang, was very popular in Europe, and they are the ones who've been attributed about 1 billion euros, actually swindling 1 billion euros in Europe. And their modus operandi was typically, just to double click on what I spoke earlier, was to target a user inside an environment through a spear phishing, then do lateral movement, get to the main thing, and that's been replicated in multiple environments in large organizations, large banks, and get to the central servers where you actually have financial information like your ATM switch and so on and so forth, modify their balances, and then appoint a set of mules outside the jurisdiction, and they did a whole lot of compromises of this kind. And then they could actually siphon off that money. Now, to Mr. Tiwari's point, the guy actually was caught in Spain. And the intruder was caught in Spain, and at least one of the kingpins was caught in Spain. But having said that, we have actually seen that kind of Cobalt, and it's, there's a company called Cobalt Strike as well, which built on that particular malware, and it's a very common malware and a threat vector that is used to compromise financial services and financial systems. And to Mr. Tiwari's point, the other day I was just reading in the newspaper, apparently the bridegroom's value in rural India has actually increased if they proclaim to be hackers. But that's on a lighter note. But having said that, it's definitely a criminal offense. And there's a lot of, the other day I was at the panel with the cybercrime from both from Karnataka and from the UP. And obviously there is a huge section of people who are actually monitoring to make sure that these people are brought to books.
But I think on the point of what the cybersecurity industry is doing, there is definitely global cooperation which is happening and multiple discussions are happening.
Is there any such informal group that has been globally formed among the industry people?
Yeah, so
where some organization which has been confronted with this situation can approach, or some self-help group or some not-for-profit organization, this type of thing which has come up, or some think tank?
Yeah, so for incident response and security, incident management and operations and general awareness, there is something called as computer emergency response teams, CERT-in, and there is CERT-in in India as well, and they do all the work related to...
What is their response generally? Experience?
No, they're very good. They're very good. They're very proactive. If all of you go to the CERT-in website, you will find a lot of high quality material which you can read and understand in terms of what's happening in the country. They also do a lot of awareness, but more importantly, they engage with the government bodies and the private sector and stipulate things that are required for national critical infrastructure. Okay. So that is one example. At a global level, there are forums, like there is a lot of work which is happening in World Economic Forum on cybersecurity related matters, where each country is representing, companies are represented, and they discuss various topics and decide on what are the things that are required to be done for global cooperation, especially from the point of view of attribution and apprehending the bad guys, right? So that is also happening. Then there is work done by, within India, there are bodies like NASSCOM and Data Security Council of India, They are playing a very important role in fostering the talent, the startup ecosystem, and also best practices, and driving the government and the private sector collaboration and cooperation and working together. There are many examples of that.
Good. So basically, in this World Congress of Accountants, going by the participants list, most of the audience is from India or other similarly placed countries like Africa and other developing nations. And we all are confronted basically with the same problems. That is, the world is coming out of COVID. We all know companies have problem calling people back to work. Even Mr. Musk has been confronted with this situation. And digitalization and implementation and emerging technology is a regular phenomena. So in this situation, moving from self-help groups and macro level and international developments, if I have to ask basically based on your experience, what are some of the best practices financial organizations must follow to safeguard themselves from cyber threats and breaches? Based on your experience, what could be that list of best practices based on your individual experience, if I have to ask each one of you? One by one, if you could. That would be really...
Sure.
Yeah.
So some of the best practices, I think if you take an example of ransomware attack, now some of the best practices that you can do is take regular backups of your data locally or in cloud. That's one of the controls that you can do as a best practice. Second is you can actually have some of the security controls must have, I would say, two-factor authentication, right? And the other control which is very, very must today is encrypt your data. Because the moment you encrypt your data, even if it is stolen, it is of no use to that hacker because he can't do anything with that because the key is safe with you, right? So I think these two aspects are important from best practices perspective. And I think cyber awareness really plays a very important role. That's the second aspect. And the third aspect I would say is visibility. I think one of the best practices is to know where your critical data is lying. Because today, as part of digital transformation, the data is just exponentially growing and it is spread across on-premise, cloud, multiple places, right? So you need to know where your critical data is lying, like Aadhaar card, PAN card information, all of that information you need to know. If you don't know where the critical information is lying, then how are we supposed to even protect it, right? So that becomes a second best practice in terms of having visibility to where your critical data is lying and then start protecting that data. So I think these are some of the starting points that I would say are the best practices.
Yes, Mr. Salvi.
So one thing I wanted to assure you, assure the audience is that, while I know today's world and the future world is going to be hybrid, because we will never go back to pre-COVID days where everybody used to come to work from office. And so the technology world...
You believe so?
Yeah, we believe so. We believe so that it is going to be, the future is hybrid. I mean, all the people that we are meeting globally and we are looking at the trends which are happening.
That's the wisdom developing, basically.
Yeah. So I don't think we'll have a situation where...
And industry is comfortable with this thought.
Yeah, I think industry has to be comfortable with what the ecosystem is comfortable with. And it cannot just, it has to respond to the trend.
It cannot be enforced upon the people.
Exactly. So this is what we believe is going to be the future of the world. And so the technology world has already adopted and adapted to how we will be able to manage hybrid. And so therefore security solutions have also emerged, which are able to allow that. So the assurance that I wanted to give on behalf of cybersecurity industry is that we now have solutions and tools which will ensure that we will not be compromised or we will have insecurity because we are in a hybrid zone. There is enough solutions available right now, if one has to choose from, to be equally safe or maybe better than pre-COVID scenario. That is the first point. I think the point that Tushar was talking about is more in the context of best practices that maybe accountants need to follow for protecting their infrastructure.
We are
and,
among accountants, so we
Yeah.
should be talking.
Right.
When in Rome, behave like
Yeah,
Rome.
yeah. So basically, I think apart from the best practices that you talked about, I think one thing you have to remember is that there are no free lunches, especially on internet, right? And so if anybody is selling you anything free, you should always be very careful about that, because that is the good way of actually a malware or a bad guy entering on your computer. That's number one. The other important aspect is, do not have any illegal software on your devices, right? And also constantly upgrade your operating system. Right now, the operating system refresh cycle is 18 months. So if your operating system is not supported by Microsoft or Apple, then, if there is some patch or some vulnerability management solution which is getting deployed, you will not get that soft patch on your machine, and then it will render it vulnerable. So that's the second part. And I think the third and the most important thing is that for smaller organizations, you need to make sure you have a proper backup of your data, which is what Tushar talked about. I think making sure you have enough amount of backup of all your critical information is, I think, very important.
Yeah, so see, from my side, my perspective is there are two ways to solve this problem of cybersecurity or cybercrime. I mean, just to build on what Mr. Tiwari said, to break down that number, which he said about $6.1 trillion, it's roughly about $16 billion a day is the amount of cybercrime damages that is done every day. And it's about $11 million every minute. As chartered accountants, we can all relate to numbers very easily. I'm sure you can visualize the impact that it has. So it's a big problem. So there are two ways to deal with this. One, be reactive. Incidents would happen to our organizations, our customer organizations, and react to it. Take incidents, take response. You can do a whole lot of things. The second is to be proactive, which is where we all need to err towards. And what does that mean? I've been pondering over this for a very long time. And, I kind of was fascinated by the airline industry. If you look at the air travel, almost all of us, people who have come from outside Mumbai would have flown in. And if you, for one moment, visualize that, in the aircraft that you just flew in, there were 40,000 parts, flew almost about 30,000 feet above the ground, and probably carried about 300 passengers, 200 to 300 passengers, compared to a road transport where you just are a few feet above the ground. And you look at that, but still, it is the safest mode of transport. And if you look at the accident rates, it's actually far, far lesser. So I've always been fascinated as to why we can't learn from each of the cybersecurity incidents proactively and not wait for those incidents to happen in our own respective organizations. For example, there is a ransomware attack on an X organization and you have lost the data. Why not be at the board level or as accountants, as auditors, ask, what if that incident were to happen in our own respective organizations? How prepared are we to face and overcome such kinds of a challenge? We don't have to wait for that incident to happen to our environments and then respond to it. And that's not our accounting profession. So my summary as accountants is three things. One is to learn from what's happening around, share, which is share that information through certain, like the way we spoke earlier, certain has a various ways of doing it, and under the auspices of ICAI, IFAC, you can share a lot of these learnings. And then, of course, prepare ourselves as well as our customers, our clients, to face such kinds of cyber threats.
So our time is already over, but we started from global platform, then moved to macro level, then companies. Now moving to a common man situation. As I mentioned that day in and day out, we have been impacted by business email compromise attacks similar to that, and common men are losing money on daily basis. But what we see that still, because in a large country like India, where really it is said India lives in villages, may not be true today, but I believe that detection level seems very low, and we never hear about any recoveries that are made after the money is lost. So what are your views on it? How we can improve the detection level, and what could be a strategy to ensure recoveries? What sort of documentation is required, or what sort of controls or checks a common man should ensure so as to protect their resources, wealth, and other intangibles from these type of attacks? I hope my question is clear.
I'll try to answer, and maybe panelists can build on. So I think the first important aspect, because I've been a banking CISO before I joined my current role for a decade, and so I think the most important aspect is that how do we reach out and make sure every common man and different sections of the common man are fully aware of how to deal with this change of internet banking, right? And how not to fall prey to any social engineering attacks. And even now, in spite of so many awareness messages and so many communications that banks, Reserve Bank of India, and various other organizations have done, we still have, various different methods being used by the fraudsters to lure common gullible citizens of sharing their OTPs, sharing their passwords, giving their mobile phones to them for doing some work, and various other things. Even bank account opening frauds are there, and so many, enrollment frauds which are there. So there is a need to do, and it's no fault of theirs, right? The whole ecosystem has to make sure that we reach out and make them fully aware of the pitfalls so that they are able to embrace this massive change of digital adoption which is happening, right? That's number one. Number two, I think as the banking industry and the financial industry, we have done a lot of effort in terms of getting visibility and understanding of how these frauds are happening. We have also created consumer rights and protections for common citizens. So for example, for a certain amount of limits which are there, if there is a complaint which is raised by the common man, then banks are not supposed to ask questions. They will first refund the money and then do the investigation, right?
There is a banking ombudsman also.
Yes, there is banking ombudsman, and they are very, very effective, and it works well, and every consumer complaint is taken very, very seriously, and then banks are held accountable for that, and banks are playing a very active role in making sure that they display their responsibility.
So basically what you are trying to say is if any consumer suffers a loss due to lack of appropriate security mechanism at bank level, consumer is compensated.
Yeah, consumer is compensated, but at the same time, you need to remember that if, for example, there is a gross negligence identified on part of the consumer, for example, the physical card was not kept secure and somebody came and stole it, and that's how the fraud happened, then there's very little that the bank can do around those things. So there is a fine line, but generally speaking, by default.
So consumers should protect their PAN card, PAN data, and similar confidential data. What we are regularly seeing, these type of awareness campaigns keeps on running on social media.
That's right. So I think my view is, I'll just give you an example, okay? So when many years back, the second factor authentication for Visa cards and MasterCards was issued, like verified by Visa and MasterCard secure code. India was the first country to be 100% compliant across the globe, right? And that was because of the mandates that were issued by the Reserve Bank of India. And we have been doing similar things and have been in forefront of driving cybersecurity controls, because RBI sees this as a systemic risk for the banking system. And so they want to be ahead of the curve in terms of building controls. So we have done a good job. Doesn't mean that we should be happy about it. There's a lot more to be done.
We cannot afford to be complacent.
That's right.
Yes. So anything, Dharshanji, you would like to add on?
Sir, one thing that I've observed is there are two kinds of payments in the payment world. One is the push payments, and the other is the pull payments. And pull payments is typically what we use in credit cards or debit cards, where it's pulled from your card and from your account. And in such cases, what I've observed is usually the chargebacks, like the way we spoke earlier, is a lot easier. Because you can call back to the bank and then say, hey, and you can lodge a complaint. And mostly credit cards are typically the safest instrument to actually transact, because you can always pull back the payment. But then in the case of push payments, while I was part of the UPI cybersecurity framework and lots of design, but the very design of that instrument, which is push payments, is you actually lose a right to claim back unless you go and get it resolved through ombudsman or other kind of resolution methods. So one should be conscious. But having said that, I have also been part of many senior citizens. In fact, from my company, SISA, we launched a lot of campaigns in Karnataka, which is vernacular in Kannada, to a lot of people in the rural sites who've been tricked by calling in and asking for OTP. So there's a whole lot of awareness that needs to be done, because with this digital adoption, the new payment infrastructure, there is going to be a risk. And it's up to us and this community to kind of educate ourselves as well as educate the rest of us.
So, thank you, sir, for this wonderful session. And anything you would like to add or give message to the fraternity as far as the cyber threats and security and the entire mechanism is concerned, the role of professional accountants and the industry that they could play, and basically largely all over the world, the professional accountant community consists of small and medium practitioners. So any role you see for small and medium practitioners to take up this cyber security as a practice, or how they can really help technocrats in this as a team? Last.
So I would just sum it up by saying that,
just to summarize the thing, sir.
Just to summarize, I would sum it up by saying that, just apply the zero trust principles, okay, which says that never trust, always verify. That's number one. Number two, apply least privileges, which means only give access to those things which are required as per the role. That is number two. And number three is, assume breach. There is no such thing as 100% security. So we need to be prepared. If there is an attack, we need to be prepared to make sure that the attacker really does not move from one side to other, right? Just like the way when we go to an airport, we can't go from a departure to arrival, right? So these three things are very important, right? And as a common man, I would say that stop and think before clicking on any URL, before giving any sensitive information. Is it really meant for me? There is no such thing as free money, right? Sometimes it is too good to be true. So we need to stop and think, before we share any sensitive information. So I think I would like to sum it up with that. Vishal, you want to?
Yeah, so we used to call it as think before you click, So I think thank you so much for your patient listening, and I think all of you have a very, very important role to play in, making sure that you are able to get your clients accountable to the topic of cybersecurity. And some of the things that Dharshan mentioned about, you have access to the board and you have access to the leadership. That's where actually you need to shape, and it's still a big awareness challenge. And so you, hopefully through this session and more, would be able to drive that and evangelize that across your stakeholders. So that's the role that you can play.
Thank you for having me over. It was a fantastic conversation. But just to summarize, three things from my side. One is to learn as to what compromises are happening. Second is to share that information to your customers, yourselves, and the key people inside the organization. And third is to be prepared. So learn, share, and prepare.
Thank you. So hearing these exceptional technocrats, which are best from the industry, I should say. And I believe we all sitting here in this hall are richer in terms of our knowledge and confidence that this very serious subject is appropriately addressed and getting desired attention at appropriate level, I should say. And the message is loud and clear, I can say, what hearing you all three, that professional accountants and chartered accountants have important role to play, being an important team member in this war against cyber security threat, and we can be called better halves in this team, I believe. And particularly we are the people who know the value of money, because in any war, money plays an important role. So this is where we all should be very confident that this is something we being CFOs, we have to make sure that appropriately budgets are allocated for this purpose, and each and every money, each and every unit of money that is allocated is appropriately spent for this purpose, and internal controls, those are built up, are appropriately implemented so that threats are veered off. And as external auditors also, as internal auditors also, we have to make sure that the board level policies, whatever are prepared, are appropriately implemented. And there is a message also for IFAC, being a global federation of professional accountants from all over the world. It has to play an important role to guide CA fraternity and to work along with regulators, central bank across the globe, and to prepare to constitute, I should say, a task force. We should come out with a white paper where CAs as internal to companies are able to play an important role, and similarly for professional accountants as external auditors, they should be guided appropriately, so that this threat, which could really destabilize any nation or any corporate worlds, hundreds and 50 years of work, it is appropriately addressed. So thank you very much to all of you.
Well, a great round of applause for that incredible and insightful discussion on cybersecurity in financial services. Now, as we conclude this session, I extend a very hearty vote of thanks to our panelists on stage. A great round of applause for CA Naveen N D Gupta ji, Mr. Vishal Salvi ji, CA Dharshan Shanthamurthy ji, Mr. Tushar Haralkar ji. A great round of applause, please. And I would also like to thank all the delegates and members present here for their presence here and participation and making this session a real success. I would now be requesting on stage C. Rajendra Kumar P., Central Council member, to please come on stage and present a memento to C. Naveen N D Gupta ji, past president of ICAI. Can we have a great round of applause, please?